Sorry, I still got the cheese.
It's okay.
And I'm going to get
When you're ready, we're ready.
Chief's microphone.
I'd like to call the meeting in order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And tonight, the invocation will be given by Pastor Jim Littleton from the Holly Springs United Methodist Church. Welcome back, Pastor. Good to see you. Hello, hello.
Hi, Pastor.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. Let us pray. Dear God, we give thanks for the gift of today. And tonight, God, I ask that Holly Springs continues to be a community that not only loves its neighbor, but one that loves its neighbor well. God, we give thanks for all the schools we have in our communities, for all the children we have. May we continue to provide spaces for children to learn safely, to be places that do not have bullying, but places of acceptance. God, we ask that you help us love our neighbors well. God, I give thanks for the people that make this town what it is. We give thanks for those who lend a helping hand, those who stop and help someone across the street, those who are patient in traffic, those who are kind to their neighbors. Lord, help us to continue to be a community that loves our neighbors well. God, we give thanks for the leadership of this town. We give thanks for the city council. We give thanks for all the committee chairs. We give thanks for all those who serve and work in this community. God, be with the leaders, be with the town staff. Help us to continue to love our neighbors well. And God, finally tonight, we give thanks for our first responders, those who risk harm, life and limb, to protect those, to care for those, to help provide this community to be a safe, wonderful place to live. God, be with them and help us love our neighbors well. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you. Appreciate it. Good words. Item number 4, adjustment approval of the September 4th, 2018 meeting agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, make motion to adopt the September 4th, 2018 meeting agenda with no changes.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Item number 5 is a public comment period. We're going to open the public comment period. We have one signed up. Mr. Gerald Holloman, good to see you again. Don't worry about it. I have the same problem. How's that neck doing? It's a good answer. All right.
Thank you for this privilege. I got a few notes down here. I'm concerned about the 5-cent tax increase since the county's talking about 4 cents. So I'm gonna be facing 9 cents next year if everybody passes these tax things. Somebody needs.
Gerald, speak in the mic, will you? In the mic.
Oh, excuse me. Somebody needs to figure out how they need to wait till another year. But anyway, I'm just concerned about it. The other thing I'm concerned about is Sunset Lake Road. 540 is fixing to start under construction sometime in the near future. We need to ask you members of the board to meet with the town of Fuquay and get that town board to agree to work together to 4 lanes on Lake Road from Fuquay and tie it into 540 access to US 1. If you meet with them, you've got a competent staff here can take the ball and go with it. If you meet with them and get an agreement. That has been done here many times before. You met with neighboring towns that got agreements. The other thing, I'd like to see y'all visit Washington, D.C. I went there a long time ago. Otis Bird was with me the first time I went to Washington, D.C. And I met with 2 congressmen, a couple of senators, and I came back again in about 6 months. Met with the same people again. They had some projects I wanted them to help me fund. And believe it or not, they said, well, we'll help you. And I said, we're going to get our staff to come up there and work with your staff so we'll work out the plan. We got a whole lot of money out of Washington, D.C. in not 15 years. This bypass back here, it took us 4 years to get this funded. And Dick had the pleasure of cutting the ribbon, I hope. But that was a major thing. And we need something on the west side now. And we don't need to wait. It takes 4 or 5 years to get them projects done. So don't wait any longer. Get on to it now. Somebody, as I say, somebody needs to go to Washington, D.C. Excuse me, I'm not in the microphone. Somebody needs to get to Washington, D.C. If it ain't but 2 of you or 1 of you, and sit down with David Price and get, I guess the senator's fixing to retire. And you've got a person sitting around this table here, and went all the way around, that went to Washington, D.C. and got $1 million grant for Novitas to move over into Holly Springs. I don't know where he was on the, I can't remember if he was on the board or not, but he went up there and he got the money. You could do the same thing for this town, because they like your votes. And I would really challenge you to go, a couple of you go together, meet with some of these people and figure out some programs. And then you can send the staff, and they can work with their staff and work it out. That's the way this system works. I know, because I spent 17 years working it. The one thing I did, I went to Washington, D.C. with another commissioner, and I went back. And the next time I went back, I took a member of the staff here, the engineer, somebody on the staff went back. They introduced themselves to the congressman's staff, and they worked together to make the plan, put the plan together and get the money here. So you're sending millions of dollars to Washington, D.C. now, and back then we had 800 people here, and we probably sending $4.50. But y'all sending me millions of dollars now, so I would take advantage of that. This Sunset Lake Road is a key. If you don't start working on it now and get Fuquay to work with you, because that'll be a key to get some of this traffic off this way and go that way. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you, Gerald.
Thanks, Gerald.
At this point in time, we're going to close the public hearing and go to agenda item 6A, a continuance of the public hearing, 18 REZ 02, 5836 Cass Holt Road. Melissa Sigmund. Hi, Melissa.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So as noting, the next item that we have is a rezoning request, 18 REZ 02. This is a request to modify the zoning of approximately 42.83 acres located at 5836 Cass Holt Road from the current zoning of R30 residential to R10 conditional use, residential conditional use zoning. So before we get into the in-depth into the rezoning aspect of this case, one item that has come up regarding the property is questions regarding the timbering of the site. Now, we recently had a case that was a little bit different than this with a bank that had some potential violations. The difference here is we do have a rezoning action. So tonight we'll provide some options to you. You'll have the option to take corrective measures if you wish. You will also have the ability to act on the rezoning as well. So you have kind of a menu of options to choose from. We've presented it in this order just so that the issue is on the table. However, certainly the discussion that occurs in the rezoning may also be pertinent to this conversation as well. So just to kind of break down some of the facts, the town does have a timbering ordinance that regulates the removal of trees within the perimeter buffer. So you can see the top illustration on the right is shows the property in question in September of 2016. The middle photo in February of 2017 illustrated that a number of trees had been felled on the property. But however, since it is winter time and you don't have leaves, it's a little difficult to see that. So the image at the bottom from May 2017 is a little bit better illustration of the change in character of the site in terms of timbering. The town did not receive a timbering plan for approval. However, the property was under a state forest management plan that was approved in May of 2017. The property owner himself and representatives can speak a little bit more to the circumstances that occurred. So the town did bring this up to the applicant during the kind of the pre-application phase. Scoping meetings had occurred. It was determined, or there was this kind of aerial evidence that indicated that trees had been removed or felled from the site. And so at that time, we brought that up to the applicant. They also went through the TRC process, and we can talk about that as well, some of the things that the applicant has done. And at that point, that's when they did provide the fact that they had an approved plan or permit through the state. And so they had, in their understanding, taken the steps that were required. So while the town does require a permit, there may be some misunderstandings in terms of our process versus what's required through the state and what the state's purview is in terms of timbering. So many things can be approved through the state. The state has some very broad allowances for what can occur. However, the town does have some requirements on top of what the state allows. So this just kind of breaks down those, there were trees, some of those trees have been removed. So with that being said, the town, as part of our timbering ordinance, does provide the option for town council to deny permits or plan approvals. So that would be more relevant to building permits or to development plans or site plans. So there are options if the town council would like to deny those or to limit them in terms of a time frame for up to 3 years. However, as I said, because we do not have a development plan on the table this evening, you can choose to make one of these motions, or we can also proceed with the zoning case, and you may wish to identify conditions, or the applicant may wish to identify conditions that rectify this issue. You will see that some of the conditions that they've proposed are related to the landscape buffers and in terms of trying to make the property appropriately landscaped. So that is where this conversation goes in terms of your options. So you can discuss this now, we can hear from the applicant regarding this issue, or you can also hear the remainder of the zoning and make a determination at that point.
I would like to hear the applicant myself. Anybody feel the same?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be appropriate right now.
Sorry.
Actually, can I just ask a couple questions before they come up from Melissa? When did they start to talk to the town about this development? So
Okay.
this was a May 17th, 2017 timber.
Councilmember Kelly, sure. So I can give you a little bit of timeline in terms of this project. This property is located within the Southern Area Planning Initiative. That was a study that was underway from August until February when council received those findings, as you may recall. So the applicant had actually had interest early on based on the pause in rezonings during that. They held back, did not make application. The owner and petitioner kept involved in that process and were keeping up to speed with the developments that came out of that in terms of council's decision. And so once the findings had come out, they kept in touch with us. They had several scoping meetings starting in October of 2017, following up in December 2017, and then in March of 2018. The actual application then came in at that point in time. Again, they were interested in proceeding, but they understood that they really needed to wait until the Southern Area Planning Initiative results came out and the comprehensive plan had been updated. And so they were holding to make sure that they had understood what council was interested in from that standpoint. So they did not formally proceed then until March of 2018. And then went to the Technical Review Committee in April of 2018 to discuss their proposal.
Okay. Shall we call these in order, signed in? Well, Steve Galui is the first. You want to do that first, Steve, or you tell me? That'd be fine, okay. Benny, tell us your name and address again, please, and then tell us what's going on.
My name is Benny Glenn. My address is 5836 Castle Oak Road, the property that's been discussed. That's where I reside there. It's not just a farm, that's our home.
Right.
And we are actively farm. It's not just land, we farm and live there. And the reason that we did the timber, we started in 15. The state Forest Service come out and did that survey, and they go through that process. Then 16, they advised us we would cut the timber. If I was you, I would cut the timber. And I was still hesitant, but then my wife got sick, and that's when I said, we need to go ahead and cut the timber. And that's basically it. We wasn't intending to selling. We was planning on replanting the trees, and Corona got sick. Then October, September, Steve approached me about selling the land. We weren't even in the market for the land. But that's when we got into the market for the land, because my wife got sick. We were planning on planting the trees and staying there. But she got real sick and still sick. So that's where we are with the property.
Benny, you told me once before, I think, when I came out there, where were those trees that you cut down? Was it clear in the back, as I recall, or not?
They're on the back side. All the open properties on the road.
Yeah, okay.
The land, the trees is on the back side of the property.
Other questions of Benny?
Yeah, can you go back to the picture of 2016, 17?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So on this map here, because it's kind of hard to tell with the clearing, because it's, September is where it's full, and February it's cold, and you barely see any trees. Tell me, I'm trying to see specifically where.
The trees are.
Well, you had cut, yeah.
It's the white line on the outer edge, the dark, at September 16.
Okay.
It just follows the white line. Our timber followed the white line all the way around the property, up into the buildings. See the clearing?
Yeah.
Can you show that, Melissa, with the,
With the with the mouse. That'd be
I know where it is, but
The-
right, show it.
Sure. The image from May 2017 may be the most effective. So this is when you can see all of the deciduous trees are in leaf here. So the areas that appear to be brown
Yeah.
have been timbered.
Okay.
So that would be the western portion of the site, as well as
Right.
Okay.
some of the street frontage
All
here.
right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions at this point? Hearing none. Thanks, Benny. Good luck with your wife.
Thank you.
Steve Galui.
Mr. Mayor, are we starting the public hearing, or are we still going to make a determination on the timbering first?
We decided we'd do this first.
Are you speaking for the timbering?
No.
But staff has
I
not
mean,
presented the rezoning yet.
I'm speaking about the
Sorry.
timbering in
Sorry.
my speech,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about the whole development.
That's
Is that
why I
okay?
was thinking.
You probably want to wait until the public hearing is open. Council's right now making a determination on whether or not they enact the penalty for timbering.
I opened the public hearing.
You did
Sign
open,
up. They said, yeah,
you opened the public,
yeah, opened it,
We're
and I
we're
have.
talking about the timbering first, as I understand it.
You want to, well, I think it might all tie together. That's the question.
if you want to open the public hearing, you could do that.
I did.
Oh,
I'll do it again.
I didn't hear you, sorry.
That's all right. All right, I think we're okay. All right. The public hearing is still open, or is open, or whatever.
Can I get a clarification? So we're postponing the timbering to hear the whole project, and then we vote on everything then? Is that what's going on now?
I think,
I think I need to know more about the project conditions and so forth, and hear more about
it all fits.
anything they want to say about the timbering before rendering any kind of timbering.
And then we'll go back to the timbering. Okay.
Yeah.
I just,
Okay.
Okay, I want to thank the Town of Holly Springs staff, Pulte Homes, Town Council, and the community for the guidance and positive support everyone has given me over the last year in order for me to fill a void within the community and bring a unique ranch-style development to the Town of Holly Springs. This development will consist of all ranch-style homes, a community center, and walking trails throughout the community. Pulte Homes will be the builder for this development and has been serving age-targeted consumers longer than any other builder in the Triangle. They go the extra mile to create a great environment for every community they build. For example, one of Pulte Homes' divisions is Adele Webb Communities, which is known for creating the great lifestyle environment for age-targeted communities. When I originally met with the staff, existing zoning allowed for 3 units per acre, which would have allowed me to build 120 homes on this property. I have since taken into account the town staff, community comments, and town council recommendations to reduce this to only 98 homes. Building only 98 homes equates to 2.3 units per acre, which is below the recently voted amount of 2.5 units per acre in the Southern Area Long-Term Planning for this area. The first thing I did when I put the land under contract was to meet with North Carolina DOT and the town staff together in order to figure out what road improvements would need to be completed to ensure the safety of the community and take into consideration the future growth of the community and neighboring towns with regards to the necessary road improvements. I contacted Natalie with the town of Fuquay-Varina's planning department today and found out that they have approved 6,750 homes within Fuquay alone as we speak. Everyone is aware of the fact that a large majority of these people will be traveling through the town of Holly Springs to access Highway 55 and US 1 in order to get to work in Research Triangle Park, North Raleigh, and Durham areas. I asked North Carolina DOT and the town staff what I could do within my new development to potentially relieve some of the pressure on the town that is occurring within the town of Holly Springs and surrounding towns. They told me first to hire a third party to conduct a traffic analysis with regards to my development. I immediately hired Kimley Horn to do this work because they have done work for the town of Holly Springs in the past and also conducted the traffic study for MI Homes project. Therefore, they already are familiar with this area. The outcome from all of this is that I build half of our median divided highway in front of my development, consisting of curb, gutters, and sidewalks. The town staff also asked that I contribute financially to improve a turning lane, which I was more than willing to contribute to. So I actually tripled the contribution amount that was required by the town staff to be fair to the community with regards to development. I will be also straightening out the sharp curve that exists in Cassholt Road directly in front of my development. All of the additional road improvements with regards to Cassholt Road straightening and widening will cost me approximately $500,000 alone. We will be also paying for the extension of the sewer from this project to the neighboring property behind us through the Holloman's property at our expense, not the town's expense. I have my traffic engineer, Earl Lewin, who works for Kimley Horn, present with us this evening to discuss the traffic situation as it pertains to my development as well. When speaking to the community, town staff, and council, tree preservation was a big concern to the community. I have incorporated the new 20% tree protection ordinance, which came into place after I put this property under contract in my financial projections. I took that into place and we have it in our current site plan as it exists today. I've also worked around all the champion trees that exist on the property when I created my site plan. We will not be touching any champion trees. The owner, Benny Glenn, and his family were part of the state tree protection program long before I asked to purchase his property. Mr. Glenn went through great lengths to ensure he cut the trees down on this property in accordance with the state law at the time. Mr. Glenn's property is located in the town of Holly Springs, ETJ, and had no idea that the town had any jurisdiction on this farm with regards to cutting down the timber. His family had no intentions on selling the farm, and as it had multiple offers to purchase their farm over the years. I just so happened to approach him in an unfortunate time when his wife became ill and his family needed money to support his family's excessive medical bills at the time. The Vance family has also joined us tonight as well. And the Vance family own the property located at 5808 Castle Road, which is located directly beside us to the left of our development. We work closely with the town staff and the Vance's family to create a buffer surrounding their property for our development, which the Vance family is now comfortable with. We have also asked the town staff and council to incorporate this buffer request as a special use to our rezoning this evening in order to be considerate and fair to our neighbors. In summary, understand from certain members of council and staff and citizens that there is an interest in senior housing and affordable housing within our community here. I look forward to being a part of this process in the near future and bringing that to the town of Holly Springs. With all of this being said, I truly appreciate all of your guidance and support and ask everyone for a positive vote on this project this evening. Thank you.
Questions to Mr. Glui?
Yes, Mayor.
I said, is there questions to Mr. Glui?
Oh.
You mentioned age-targeted community several times. What does that mean, and what will?
We don't have a specific age requirement for our community, but we wanted to bring ranch-style homes to the community to offer families a place to bring their parents, and they can be around similar and like people within the community, and offering all ranch style. Anybody can live there, but we wanted to offer something to the community that's a niche, and that's something that I can't tell you where you can buy anything like that in the town of Holly Springs, or really Cary for that fact, or Fuquay Varina that I know of, that is a community solely based on ranch style communities. And we aren't going to do a pool, we're going to do a community center so that they can do arts and crafts and meet, you know, and have events there in the community that kind of fit the need for that community.
Did you do any analysis of the impact on the local schools with possible extra children that were going to Holly Springs High School, or what the impact would be for those schools?
We didn't do a formal analysis. I wouldn't even know where to go for that, to be honest with you. But that's why we did this project, because we did not want to impact the schools. We were looking for a project that wouldn't impact the schools, and this fell in line with doing that.
How big are the homes?
The homes are about 2,400 square feet. And the majority of them will be all on one level. There is one plan that will give you an extra room upstairs for if you have grandchildren or anybody visiting, or an office that they can use upstairs.
Would the TIA be appropriate at this point, or do you want to wait on that and discuss the timbering at this point? We have one more.
I just have one more.
Yeah, or go ahead with
question.
questions, of course.
Yeah, so you talked about the 20% tree preservation. Can you elaborate on how you would incorporate that into the rezoning and as a conditional use?
Sure. On the 20% tree protection program, originally, we had it set up on the old terms. So then, when you all voted just a couple weeks ago that you wanted to implement the 20% tree protection program, I actually went back for about the 7th time with McAdams, and he'll come and speak more about that, because I don't know the exact verbiage on that, so I'm going to let him speak about that. But we went back and recreated the whole site plan to incorporate the 20% rules. And I can let him explain that.
Is it time for a staff presentation?
So, yeah, you probably do want to back up and hear the staff presentation of it, and I do want to caution you on site-specific things that aren't necessarily tied to the conditions that he's offering that have been published, like houses and developer and community rooms and things like that. You really just want to look at all the uses that R10 CU, and CU are those conditions that he offers, everything. So if you're impressed by a developer that's named, you got to erase that from your memory, because it could be a developer that doesn't impress you that comes in at the end. And if you were to sort of narrow your focus at this stage is sort of subject to challenge, because somebody could say, well, the town council and this legislative decision of rezoning were sold on an aspect that never came to fruition, and therefore the rezoning is invalid. So we do want to keep it sort of 30,000-foot view as far as zoning all the things that can happen in R10, CU, and I think probably cue this up for Melissa to tell you what all that is, and sort of, we might be batting a little bit out of order here.
All right,
Yeah.
Thank you.
good point.
Hey, that's a good point, Mr.
Right.
Stefano. I understand where you're coming from on that.
Okay, so we'll go
Yep.
back to Melissa at this point? Right?
Yes,
Okay. We'll go back to Melissa.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gluey.
Thank you. And actually, to address the one concern regarding the timbering or regarding the tree preservation, the applicant would be subject to the new tree preservation regulations based on the fact that the development plan would not have been submitted until after those regulations were approved. So regardless of who develops and when, they will be subject to the new regulations. Getting back to the site, so the kind of the basics, as we said, from R30 to into the microphone. Okay. Sorry, I understand it's a little bit difficult to hear. So the adjacent uses for this site, we do have agricultural located to the north and the south of the property. To the east, you have Cass Holt Road, and then there's single-family residence. To the west, that is vacant and undeveloped. In the vicinity of this site, we do have several schools. You can see the recently opened Buckhorn Creek Elementary School on Honeycutt Road, as well as the Holly Grove Middle School and Holly Springs High School located farther north on Cass Holt Avon Ferry Roads. I know this is a little bit repetitive. We're just trying to backtrack for you, though. So you can see the majority of the properties in this vicinity are currently zoned R30 as the same as the proposed property. The R30 zoning district is a single-family residential zoning district. It allows agricultural and rural residential uses. It's also considered somewhat of a holding zone. So when property is brought into the town from the county, it would come in with the R30 designation. It is often expected that R30 properties are rezoned to fit then with the development plan and the development vision for the town through our comprehensive plan. And in keeping with that, it would be very common to have those properties rezoned. Going out to a larger context, you can see that while R30 designation is surrounding the immediate vicinity of the site, within the larger area, there are a number of properties with the R10 conditional use zoning as is proposed for this site. That means that the base zoning has similar development standards, although each conditional use zoning would have particular unique conditions placed upon it. However, the base development standards in terms of the minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet and such would be the same. So there are other areas with very compatible zoning in the vicinity. As you may remember, on August 7th, you recently approved the changes to the future land use map, modifying a number of the land use designations within this area. So the map you see before you is our newest version as approved on August 7th. You can see the property is located in the new suburban residential category with 1 to 2.5 units per acre. However, directly to the south of the property is the neighborhood village center designation. So that would be a mixed use focusing on neighborhood scale, commercial uses with allowance for some residential above those commercial uses or non-residential uses. Also noted, you can see in the blue are the school sites called out in the institutional category to differentiate them. Even though they may have residential zoning, we know that they do function differently. And with that, we can get into the engineering.
Okey-doke.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Try to get this on my level here. All right. So with this rezoning, the project site will be required to connect to municipal water and sewer, as Mr. Galuli kind of mentioned earlier. There will be additional studies and evaluations that may be needed at the time to determine the size and location and magnitude of any extensions needed to serve the project site. With the rezoning, a traffic impact analysis was completed and approved. It should be noted also that the applicant's traffic engineer provided a supplemental sensitivity analysis in a memo after a planning board to address some of the concerns that were brought up that evening. And with the sensitivity analysis, they looked at the intersection of Honeycutt and Cassholt Road, where the distribution was skewed more heavily at that intersection. And I will allow the engineer to speak to that in a little more detail, but I wanted to make sure we brought that to your attention. With the environmental side of the project, this project will be held to the town's NPDES Phase 2 post-construction stormwater ordinance and any other applicable requirements in the stream basin. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Concerns?
Go to this point? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Would you like to hear from the traffic engineer at this point? This might be a good time to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just checking.
Yeah.
I think it's okay. I think you also signed up, Earl.
Should we finish the planning presentation?
He was here early.
Okay. Do you want to finish?
So council, this is a TIA based
should
on
finish the
some
front
subdivision that could be there with the zoning, not specifically to this one.
So I haven't read the TIA, but I would hope that it would incorporate all the permissible uses in R10 CU and the conditions that are being offered by the developer. And one of the conditions I think was density, 93 single-family lots. So that sort of narrows it. One of the conditions that you're offering. So you're limiting your zone criteria in this particular one to 93 units, and I certainly hope that that would be the scope of the TIA.
And if during the development plan phase, if it should come in at a more intense use or in higher density, they would be required to amend the approved TIA. And if any additional improvements surfaced from that amendment, then that would have to be incorporated with the development plan as well.
And it won't, because it's a zone specific for 93.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks, John.
They couldn't do it without another, coming back to you for another rezoning.
Right.
And that's why this one's a little different, because it's got the CU attachment to it. You're really limiting to that number of lots.
Okay. And I think we're going to proceed with the staff presentation, and then we'll get back to the traffic engineer. Okay.
Whatever.
Thank you. Just a few more slides, just to cover those conditions that were just brought up. So there are 11 conditions. Just a few of those, as mentioned, we would be limited to 93 single-family lots within this property. The developer has agreed to the dedication of all of the improvements identified in the TIA and fees that are customary. In addition, as mentioned, tree preservation, specifically a requirement to preserve the two 35-inch white oaks on the site, providing a landscape buffer, a 40-foot landscape buffer along the southern property, so an increased, enhanced landscape buffer. The specific providing the open space area within our single-family districts. If you're not within a development options neighborhood, there is not a requirement currently for usable open space, so this is a condition above and beyond our typical requirements. So they would be providing walking trails within the property as well as additional open space. The right turn lane identified by Rachel for Avon Ferry at Cass Holt. And we also have an additional later add. As was noted, the petitioner has been working with the adjacent property owner to the west and has included in your packets an 11th condition that would indicate an enhanced buffer along that property boundary, so providing additional tree species, additional trees, in addition to what's typically required, so essentially creating a more opaque screen of tree material. So that's an 11th condition, as I mentioned, that's been added since the time of planning board, as they've continued to work with adjacent property owners to make sure that they are becoming a good neighbor and that they'll be a good neighbor with this development. So with
Melissa,
that.
can you go back? Was there any condition? They mentioned they were making ranch homes, but there's no condition here for that. So
Correct.
it could end up being not ranch homes.
Correct. And with that, we could take any questions that you have for staff or bring up the applicant's team.
Any other questions for Melissa?
The planning board report, or is that later?
Excuse me?
The planning board report, or is that later?
Yeah.
I apologize. We can bring that in at any time if there is additional information that they can describe. So, if not,
Do you have their slide?
Again,
I
name, please.
could summarize
Yeah.
the planning board's
do.
concerns in traffic. Those were most of the concerns, and I think the applicant did address some of the concerns. The traffic analysis initially assumed everyone would go down Cass Hole Road to Avon Ferry, so they did some additional analysis if Honeycutt was used instead. So that's been done before this. And there were some other concerns by a particular planning board member, not really general to the planning board, about costs of sewer extensions, water extensions, but I think that will be forthcoming in the development plans.
Questions?
Thanks.
I think we all already saw. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Planning board vote was 6-1-2? Right. Thank you. All right, Counselor, at this time, shall we do the TIA?
It's your meeting, sir.
I just checking. Got to be a little tricky on me. All right, let's do the TIA at this point. And the other person signed up was Earl Llewellyn, correct? Again, early riser.
Good evening, everyone. Earl
evening.
Llewellyn, Kimling Horn, 300 West Morgan Street in Durham. We did the traffic impact analysis for the project, which was reviewed by the town's consultant and NCDOT. We work closely with those agencies in drafting what we call an MOU right off the bat to determine the scope of the traffic study, the assumptions, which include the number of intersections to be analyzed, background growth rates, other approved developments, trip generation for the project, as well as site trip distribution, which I'm going to go directly to that point because that was one of the questions that came up at the planning board, I understand. That question specifically was, I think a member thought that with the schools being to the north on Avon Ferry, that traffic from this project may try to avoid that area and use Honeycutt Road to a greater degree than people do now. We assumed that traffic would use the same diversion ratio that they are doing now to avoid the schools. Those distribution percentages for your consideration were 65% to and from the north on Avon Ferry and 15% via Honeycutt. The remainder is to the south and on Rouse Road. But to address this question even further, we did do a sensitivity analysis that said, what if we flip those? And what we confirmed is that we still have very good levels of service with those assumptions in place. That's because this is a very low traffic generating use, and we have improvements just completed by the school. So I hope that helps address that question. I think the summary of what this project proposes has already been mentioned, which includes half the ultimate 4-lane divided cross-section, which will improve safety and sight distance in the area, and the payment in lieu toward an eastbound right turn lane extension on Avon Ferry Road. happy to address any questions you've got.
Any questions, Mr. Willen? Seeing none?
No.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Now, I would assume that we ought to go through the 1, 2, or 3 at this point.
Charlie didn't realize he signed up on.
I'm sorry?
He's with McAdams, he's not on, like, he didn't know he had to sign up on the sheet. He's the one that did, they were asking about the 20% tree ordinance.
Right.
He can explain that.
All right. I don't think let's get all facts on the table. All right.
He had to be sworn in, or?
You need-
to be sworn in?
No, no, you have to-
It's just a
it's
general
public.
use rezoning.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't know I needed to sign in.
That's all right, no problem.
My name's Charlie Oakley, with the principal planner with McAdams Company, 2905 Meridian Parkway in Durham, North Carolina. Just to address the question about tree preservation, once the tree preservation ordinance was adopted, we talked to planning staff about what that means for any proposed development on this parcel. And it is a little convoluted because of the lack of existing material on the site, but our plan to have a 20% tree preservation within the development is to have expanded buffer widths to plant additional material in those buffers to make up that 20% tree preservation replanting area. So that is how we're going to address those concerns, or that ordinance.
Questions?
Is that what's inclusive in the conditional use, the 40-foot wide buffer to the south incorporates that additional 20%? Or is it in addition to other material on the site?
Well, the idea is to, we're required an A20 to the north and west, and we're volunteering to a condition for a 40-foot buffer to the south to provide some transition to that more intense neighborhood village commercial use to the south. So instead of the 5-foot buffer that's required for an A20, we will greatly expand that. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it's in excess of 40 feet in some areas to provide some additional plantings within those buffer areas to make up for tree preservation.
And I think as Melissa said before, that's a development plan requirement, correct?
We're correct, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
If this lot was not timbered, what would the plan be for trees around the sub? Would it be very different than just?
No, I
this?
don't think so. No, it'd be very similar. And the only difference would be that in the areas where we're proposing to have the 15% open space, not all of that would have to be cleared. So you could have, open space parks with existing trees, things like that in those open spaces to account for some tree preservation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You good at this point? Okay, thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. At this point in time, we'll close the public hearing.
Unless there's anybody else who wants to talk.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, we have 3 options here, Council, and number 1, town may deny. Number 2, may deny permit. Number 3, the town council may also decide to require no penalty. So I guess before we go any further, we have to resolve that issue. Is that correct?
So you actually could rezone the property and then enact the penalty later. The penalty being a 3-year time
Yeah.
before you would receive a development plan. I think it'd probably be just darn right neighborly of you if you would make a decision on what you're going to do. It would be a little bit wrong for the developer or the property owner to go forward, and then they come in with a development plan and you say, no, we're going to deny the development plan even though you granted the rezoning.
I understand.
So it is up to you. You could grant the rezoning and then enact the penalty later. But I think, in fairness to everybody, it would probably be the right thing to do to act on it now so that everybody knows going forward what to do.
Right. Well, one of the determinations was exactly that. It goes back to the tree timbering ordinance violation discussion. I would think that, I wanted everybody to have their shot at this to give a full picture. And the TIA is certainly a part of this, as is the timbering issue you just gave. So I would suggest at this point in time, to go any further, we have a choice. We have three choices, really. And one choice is to go further, and the other two is to stop. So, my many years of experience says, why don't we do that first? Make sense?
Like I said, it's your meeting.
All right, council. Let's start with my left and go down the street. You can vote for one thing.
Well, real quick,
Sure.
when it comes to the timbering, whether, denying, or to deny permit and plan approvals for the subject parcel for 3 years, 2 years, how far back does this go? At what date does that penalty start? Are we starting, a year and a half back when the timbering actually happened, or how?
So the ordinance is rather silent as to when that happens, but I think it'd be my legal interpretation that it would be at the time of the offense being the timbering.
When was, what?
May.
date was that? May of
May 2017.
Thank you.
Other questions on one of the three options?
I have one. Our tree ordinance is required at the development plan phase, right? So would there be any benefit into securing a condition for the 20%? Would that help at all to make sure that whatever shows up on this property is going to maintain that? Or would our tree ordinance save us at the development plan phase because of the requirement for the 20%?
I don't think they could develop without following the rules of the tree preservation. If you were to want to make it a condition, it has to be a condition that's offered by the
Right.
Applicant, and then a new condition would force them to go back. So, but in essence, I think it's a condition to abide by our ordinances.
So they're going to have to do it
That's in
regardless if
there.
it's a condition or not? Okay.
Any other questions on one of the three options?
So what's the third option?
Third option is the town council may also decide to require no penalty.
I'd like to be consistent. When we had the bank where we approved and gave a fine, I don't know what the dollar amount was in that scenario. I don't know, John, if you can advise us on that.
Planning, in that particular example, it was a conditional use, or a special exception use, excuse me. So it was a special exception use because it was a downtown development. It's not entirely unlike this one, which is a general use rezoning subject to conditions. The issue is that you found the requirements that you had to make certain findings of fact with the bank because it was in the downtown village core area. You had to find that it was in keeping with the neighborhood, that it was pedestrian friendly, that it met all the goals of our comprehensive plan, and they're rather lofty goals. So you found as a fact that they would meet that even though they violated the timbering ordinance by cutting down 2 really big attractive oak trees on Main Street if they paid a restitution, and the restitution amount was $13,600 based on $100 per caliper inch of things that were estimated by the planning department. They haven't paid the remediation, they haven't gone forward, and they're in the thinking about it stage still, as far as I remember, as far as I know, as of right now. So I don't think the $13,600 threw them over the edge. It was just that they're waiting to determine whether or not they go forward with the plan. So you do not here have that condition that you need to make a finding of fact that this neighborhood meets all those call it touchy-feely goals of the comp plan and the downtown village core stuff. You don't have that here. However, if you were of the mind as a council to institute the penalty for timbering without prior approval, and in lieu of doing that, there was some restitution amount to pay, and that could be done voluntarily by the developer, that's okay. The ordinance really doesn't have that choice provision spelled out. It's either wait 3 years or nothing at all. However, if you were to find it, if you were to determine that there was in fact a timbering violation here, and you said in lieu of waiting 3 years, there's a restitution amount that we could accept if the developer's willing to pay for it. You know, that's what you did with the bank in essence.
So, but with the bank, it was, wasn't the land, well, it was the contractor, correct, who cut the trees down? Here, it was the homeowner, not the developer, so if there was a fine, that would be between the developer and the landowner to determine, correct? I mean, there is a little bit of a difference.
There is. Yeah, there's a
You
big
know,
difference. There is.
So,
Big difference.
Speaking for myself, I'm inclined not to impose a penalty. I think our tree ordinance that we just passed is the quickest and best way to, you know, get that area replanted. It's a requirement, the 20%. To, you know, deny a permit for 3 years leaves a lot that's been timbered for 3 years with nothing going on. And motion number 2, with 2 years, I mean, we're pretty much on that anyway.
Right.
By the time permit and plan approvals will go forward. So I think, although it's not punitive, to not impose a penalty is the quickest way to repopulate that property and make it attractive.
So motion 2, what is different of the replanting the buffer area versus the 20% that they have to do? Is it about the same, or is number 2 have more replanting?
I don't know, is that can you answer that, the difference between the?
Mayor and Council, I wouldn't have that number offhand in terms of what would be required. In either case, we know that the applicant would have to maintain perimeter buffers on the site, and then would likely have some additional open space areas on site for stormwater, et cetera. It may be similar, but we would certainly not have those exact numbers. As mentioned, some of the areas would have been kept as buffers, and they'll be replanted. So it's probably a mix of some that would be the same areas and some that would be different areas on the property.
Well, just for the public record, the staff has said the petition complies and the planning board is 612. That's going to be a factor in the decision too, one way or the other, doesn't matter.
well, and I think it's important to remember, our goal with the tree ordinance is not to make money, not to make lives difficult, but to remind people of our tree ordinance, our tree preservation, and you know, actually with this here, it's more of the word getting out, so that landowners, developers do know that we are serious about this. That being said, in this case, I tend to agree with Councilman Billidson that I don't feel a penalty at this point is necessary, but I would like to see the developer go that extra mile, as they've already said they would, maybe even a little extra, to give us that more of a buffer, more trees, and bring some of that back.
But they're just meeting the 20%. They're just doing what they're supposed to do.
Right, but I mean, I don't know if we can ask them for more or what, but I just feel that the person that this is going to hurt the landowner the most, I feel, more so than the developer. If it was the developer, I mean, I'm sorry, but if it was the developer that had went in and clear cut it, I think we'd be talking a little bit different.
Yeah, I don't see, you know, real ill intent when this happened. I wouldn't even call it gross negligence, given the circumstances. So I feel that even, you know, it is meeting the new tree ordinance with 20% and possibly additional, I don't know until we see the development plan, but it seems to me the best way to replant, the quickest way to replant and bring that property up to the standards that we had wanted it to be in the first place.
Yeah, I actually agree with Councilman Littleton there. I think it makes sense. There was no malice here by the landowner. It's been a year and almost 6 months, and by the time this plan comes and completed, you're looking past 2 years. So I'm in agreement with Councilman Middleton on this one.
So what I'm hearing is a 1.
I'm not done.
I know, I'm going through, oh, you got more questions?
Yes.
All right, hang on.
So what stops us from the next person to come up and say, oh, yeah, I didn't know I was going to do that? I mean, that's the thing. And we've hardly had any teeth to begin with for preserving trees. And I am very sympathetic with the landowner in this case. But what is it that's going to stop us from this again? Because I feel like the precedence has been we had barely any teeth, and so far we've approved everything.
Well,
Between this and-
and I agree, but I don't want to use them as the guinea pigs either. I think we need to get the word out more that the information out more that this needs to be, that we aren't going to be enforcing this. But I know exactly what you're
I
saying.
mean, the next could be just as much of a hardship.
Right.
So,
I think the word is out there now. The ordinance is out there now. This was, I mean, the wheels started turning on this back in 2015 and culminated in, I guess, late 2016 or 2017. I think the more that we communicate this through TRC, through actions like what we're doing right now, through planning board, extensive discussion on that it does get out a bit. But I also feel like we need alternatives. That just putting the brakes on for 3 years the problem happened, we can't fix it. Not doing anything about it for 3 years seems like it doesn't help anybody. And I think we do need some alternative that can be punitive, but in a way that's not going to also harm the town or just harm that property for lack of use for 3 years.
if somebody has a timber permit, are they bound to keep 20% because they're within our 20% tree ordinance? I don't think so. I mean, they're two separate things, right? Somebody can timber and they timber. I'm trying to think of the next person is what I'm worried about.
So valid timber permits granted by the state are exempt from your requirements. The issue here is he had a valid timber permit, but just didn't show it to us before he did the timber.
Right.
So, yes, to answer your question, but then there's the buffer replanting that would have to occur.
In the case
and
of,
development.
had he shown the permit to us, would there be an issue here, or would there just still be the 20% development options or development requirement for repopulating?
So if he came to you with a valid permit, came to staff with a valid permit, it's exempt from the timbering ordinance.
So there is no
Tree
message.
ordinance.
From the timbering ordinance. Now, the tree ordinance is is more of a carrot than a stick.
Sure.
And so, in theory, if landowner comes and says, hey, I have this timbering permit from the state that I want to do, and the town of Holly Springs says, okay, by the way, if you leave your buffer pursuant to the tree preservation ordinance, that's going to save you that much more money than the trees are worth than you're cutting down if you're going to look to develop it. And sort of that's how it's more of a carrot than a stick. So,
So just boil it down. Had he came to us with the permit, and what could we do? We have to, is there anything, could we have said
No.
anything about it? And
no, we can't stop him from permitting.
Sure.
He has agricultural exemption. He has a permit from the state. We can't stop him from getting the timber off his property. What we can stop him from doing is, or what we can advise him, and the mechanisms there to say, all right, but if you leave this 20 foot here along the roadway, that's gonna, it might get you $1,000 in timber, but it's gonna allow you to save $50,000 in landscaping later. That's really how it's supposed to work, I think. And I'm just throwing those numbers in the air.
So, yeah, so even if he brought the timbering, brought it to us, we couldn't have said, no, you can't do it.
Right, if he's not looking to develop, we can't stop him from timbering his property.
That's the key word.
Which at the time he was not, correct?
No.
According to testimony, yeah. Dan, haven't heard from you.
Yeah, excuse me. You know, I'm inclined to move forward as well. You know, I think I tend to look a little bit past the tree part of this, and some of the other commitments the developer has offered here hit on some key things that we've been pretty big on as a council and as a town, and how we want to see the town develop moving forward. That includes some walking trails, open space that is not required in this rezoning since it's not development options, but they are giving 15% open space that has walking trails, in addition to a restriction on the density, which are things that are important to me in this area of town. So to me, you know, I'm looking at that as sort of a larger benefit, knowing that we're going to have required buffers they're going to have to meet, and based on the discussion here tonight, they're even going to go above and beyond what the required buffers are, which is good. You know, I think that hits us getting the trees back that were taken down, and we also get some other benefits from what they're proposing in their conditions of their rezoning.
Correct.
Not to mention straighten out that horrible curve.
Yeah, that's a big deal. All right, I think we've heard from everybody. Now, let me go back and tell you what I've heard, unless there's some more to say.
So we went past the tree, now we're talking about the roads, because I have issues with the traffic too.
No, I just,
Okay.
I was just adding to his comment of the things that are,
We're only talking about the timbering
Yeah,
ordinance.
we're talking about timber.
why he.
And what I've got is Dan, Sherry, Pete, and Tom are threes, and Christine is a one or two. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong.
She hasn't answered it.
Well, okay. Christine, you're open.
So you guys all want to move forward without a penalty?
Right.
I have some heartburn, not for this property because I have sensitivity, but the next ones.
Okay.
So
I agree, but I'm trying to figure out how this is different. If the timbering ordinance, as I understand it, he could have timbered and showed us the permit, we wouldn't have any kind of penalty assessed. And had he done the whole property without buffers, you would just have to follow the tree ordinance and the development plan? So.
But you can't, can you timber and then turn around? I mean, there's a time gap between when you timber and when you come
Unless you
to
have
us.
a permit, the timbering ordinance exempts registered forestry activity, a plan from the state. So that's completely exempt from the timbering ordinance. The only thing is you have to show it to us before you do it. That was the missing component here.
So another lot next door with a lot of trees can get a timbering permit, cut all their trees, turn around, and then come here for rezoning?
If they have a registered a state permit.
And they're not under development contract, or they're not already?
So we have a loophole in our tree ordinance for folks who are,
That was the authority that was given to us by the General Assembly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really a loophole,
not us.
but that's just
Okay.
how we're,
I think that's why we want that 20% replanting in case like that, so that it's not a barren property, but at least we can mandate some sort of regrowth in there.
And really enforce our education on this, getting the word out there.
the idea is that we would try and have some negotiations with the forestry plan to preserve a buffer along the roadway, so while they can timber, they can leave a buffer. And that was sort of the intent of the ordinance, but what we got was, from the General Assembly, was part of our charter amendment in 2004 was state forested permits are exempt. So if they show it to us, we could try and negotiate a buffer.
Anything else?
I mean, I know what you're saying.
I'm,
But if we're,
I know, I do, I understand too, 100%. But I think in this case,
yeah,
It's different.
it
really
just,
was not.
I think it is.
we could do either way. But we just need to get the word out there. more education for our landowners and our developers.
Well, unless I'm reading this wrong, the next step would be, we are at stage 3, if you will. The town council may also decide to require no penalty at this point, and then there's 2 more motions after that. Yep.
Do we have
So
to
unless
make a
there's
motion,
further
or do we just
discussion, I
move
think we'll
forward?
all,
If we decide no
I'm
penalty.
in the minority.
You know, it's probably best that you make a motion that you're going to waive, or not find a penalty in this case. I think that's what, in fairness to the developer and the landowner
Right.
going forward, that they sort of get that finality. Otherwise, you could at your next meeting say, well, wait a minute, we're going to enforce a penalty.
okay?
Okay, so I make a motion that we require no penalty.
Do I hear a second? Okay, motion been made, and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
1 nay. Okay, there's 2, I think. Yes?
Well, now we're on to,
Do we
Yeah,
need
that was
number
just,
2?
that was
That
just a
was just
penalty. We
timbering.
still have 2 more.
we still have 2 more, so this is,
Okay,
that was just.
2 more, I'm
Now
sorry.
we're on the
Yeah, go ahead.
rezoning.
Okay, got it.
But
Oh,
Back to
with
number 1.
regards to rezoning, did you have more questions?
yeah, because you said you want to talk about the roads, right?
I have, right, the traffic. So tell me what we are bound by now to talk about the TIA, because it feels like we're ahead of the game with the TIA. I do have great concerns about the traffic on that road in the local schools, and we've had TIAs in the past along these areas, and yet we're suffering with a lot of traffic issues. So there's something to me that's not adding up with TIAs that say everything should be okay, but the reality of the people driving, that that's not the reality. So that's part of why I also have issues with the rezoning, because I'm worried about the traffic.
I think I'm getting the idea that with this one, it's because the lower density. We're not putting 300 or 400 homes out there. That's probably why, that's what I feel, that the TIA was compatible.
I did look at a copy of the TIA. I mean, the trip numbers were low, in my opinion, but I'm not an engineer, but they looked low to me. But not only were they presented by the applicant's engineer, they were also vetted by our staff consultant, and they were also vetted by the DOT. I share the concern with the traffic, and, you know, did these trip generation numbers, are they really going to translate to what people actually feel out there? I don't know. You know, I tend to agree with you on that. You know, I would echo my same comment again. I think the density cap helps us with what to expect. You know, even if we do the math ourselves with some of the numbers that are published out there, you can come up with, you know, the numbers, and I don't know. But I think the concern is valid.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And you could have 10 of these come out and we're in trouble. You know, 10, 90, or, you know.
We just have what's being built now and adding more and more, you know.
Well, the TIA
That's
should,
what's hard.
and maybe he can speak to this, they should assume some background rate. I don't recall if that was stated, but I think the document said they did assume some of the improvements are already committed, and then there should be a background percentage pulled into that TIA. I don't know what that was.
So there were hello. There were background improvements included in the analysis, and I think Earl spoke to that. So the school and Honeycutt, they both completed TIAs that were approved with their projects. Most of the background improvements that were identified are being completed with those projects. So in addition to the road widening across the frontage of the Cass Holt property, they are working on realigning that curve and paying a fee in lieu toward the exclusive right turn lane from Avon Ferry Road onto Cass Holt Road.
What was the percentage of background traffic that was assumed in the analysis, though? Was it the 5%? Annually? Okay.
In addition to all of the other approved development that's identified within a study here.
Okay.
Okay. Further questions?
If I could add,
Sure.
back maybe a year ago, we had a town council workshop where we went over transportation studies, because what we were trying to do is establish a policy that then every TIA after that would be in accordance with that policy and those requirements in the policy. So we were trying to get, buy-in to the policy, and then we would use that as a measuring device for all TIAs going forward to try to get out of the picking apart of the TIA, if you will. After that, that is when we established the 5% background growth
5%.
rate. The MOU where we actually looked at all the intersections, doing it prior to rezoning, having the TIA finished prior to planning board. I'm trying to think of some of the other requirements. And so that is what we're operating under, are those policies that were set in place at that time. And that's what the applicant, if we increase numbers or whatnot, I mean, there can be comments about that, but that is the policy that we're implementing.
Okay.
I think, too, I mean, I agree, traffic is, one of our biggest problems, if not the biggest one, but we have made steps to try to improve that. Just the fact that this is coming in at 2.3 as opposed to some higher numbers that would have been approved in the past. I think R30 would be about 34 units, so this coming in at 93 is, you're talking about a 60-unit difference based on what would be allowed, period. So I know each additional car is traffic, but I think the scale of this project, the density that it's coming in under the overall density that we've been improving for this area, which is lower than what has been in the past, and the improvements that they're making, I'm pretty comfortable with that. I think that had it been a much larger scaled property with hundreds of homes, I'd be a little bit more concerned. But I think the size of this, and I know this is not part of our discussion, but just what they've spoken to as their intended use, the improvements they're making, and the overall number of homes, I don't think it will be hugely impactful in that area.
I think one thing too is we are at a point right now when it comes to development and developers coming to us that we can be a little more choosy. We can be a little more specific. And so I'm looking at things, I mean, I live out there. I have kids that go to the schools there. I do get a little twitch when I hear of development out there. But one of the things that is driving me to approve this is the road improvement in that turn lane there, and that some of that widening that's going along with what's going on right now, and the smaller density. I can't say we'd get that with any other development that went out there. Just that turn scares me every time.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big motivating factors for me.
Okay. Any other conversation on this point?
I just have one question. During Mr. Galuli's comments, he mentioned 98 homes as the condition, but the conditional use application is actually 93. I just wanted to confirm we're working off of 93, right?
That was an accident.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure.
You're right. I did
Okay.
say 98, I wrong. It's 93 for sure.
Good point. I missed that.
And with the TIA, I believe they assumed 97, so that's
Okay.
even greater than.
Thanks.
Huh, okay. Other questions or comments? Hearing none. Motion?
Motion to accept the statements of compatibility listed in agenda packets as true.
Second?
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. I hear no opposed. Suggestion number 2.
Motion to adopt ordinance 18-REZ-02 to change the zoning of 42.83 acres from R-30 residential to R10 residential conditional use with conditions offered by the petitioner and listed in agenda packets.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
1 nay. Motion passes with 1 nay. Thank you. Thank you for spending all this time. I personally, I think it's a great project, so we'll see. 6B, public hearing, annexation A 1805, Town of Holly Springs property. And Melissa's back. Thank you.
Thank
Melissa's
you, Mayor and
back.
Council. This one will be much briefer.
Okay.
This is a voluntary annexation petition for a town-owned property, so the town is acting as petitioner on this case, trying to clean up a few gaps that we've found and bring this into our jurisdiction. The property is located, as you can see, just east of Main Street, and for a little bit bigger context, you can see it is located between our downtown area and the bypass. The property is relatively small at just over 3,000 square feet, and it is a pump station. The property does meet all of the requirements for annexation. With that, we have a second.
Questions of Melissa on the annexation issue? Seeing none?
Motion to adopt annexation ordinance A 1805.
Public hearing.
Oh,
Sorry?
public hearing.
Public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. My apologies. I opened a public hearing and closed because no one signed up. That's where I was thinking. Okay, now continue on. Sorry.
I'll now make the motion to adopt annexation ordinance A 1805.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 7A, consent agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 8A, under new business, Evan Ferry Force Vein Land Acquisitions, Town of Holly Springs, 04031, Mary DePinta. No, wrong person. Aaron.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Council.
You
My
don't
name is
mind.
Aaron Levitt, Assistant Director of the Engineering Department, and Mary's with us tonight. She's been working diligently on this project since she started here, but a lot of what I wanted to do tonight is kind of give you some background information that I presented back in 2016. So I decided to present this myself. The area in question tonight is the beige colored basin shown on the attached map. This is our pump station basin map. And that identifies basically your different drainage areas where the different sewer systems drain to within town. So the goal of tonight is to provide some background information to council on this project, provide a status of the project and the expected construction schedule, and then obtain funding for some land acquisition that's necessary. So this is a more detailed look at the area in question. So the Avon Ferry Pump Station, which is down in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, is running out of capacity. That pump station is connected to a force main that runs northeast towards the water reclamation facility at the top right of your screen. So what we have is the pump station, then we have a section of 12-inch piping, and then when it hits this portion of Braxton Village, it actually reduces down to 8 inches, and then continues on at 8 inches to the reclamation facility. The reason that it necks down like that at Braxton Village is the original pump station used to be there. So it was the Braxton Village pump station, and then when the Holly Point neighborhood down here to the south was introduced, those developers, along with the town, decided to, instead of having two separate pump stations, just to eliminate the one pump station and created the Avon Ferry pump station. So that's why we have this kind of odd 12-inch to 8-inch situation going on. So the need to increase the size of this force main kind of came to light back in 2004. And then as the recession hit, the project kind of died down as far as the need. It has been shown on the utility capital improvement project list for the past several years. So what we're proposing to do with the Avon Ferry force main project is to just replace or increase the capacity of that 8-inch section. So that's the section shown in blue. So currently, the pump station operates at about 750 gallons per minute. And what this project aims to accomplish is to raising that pump station capacity to 1,600 gallons per minute. So that's all done by enlarging the size of the pipe we're trying to force this liquid through. Now, future phases of the project would involve work on the actual pump station itself, as well as the existing 12-inch line in between Braxton Village and the Avon Ferry pump station. But that's further on, and that would actually bring us up to about 3,600 gallons per minute. Okay, so I want to talk about a little bit of the challenges involved with a project of this nature. As you can see, the blue line runs through two of our larger subdivisions in town. So there's an easement, and actually a sanitary sewer easement that runs behind people's backyards. A lot of people have this area. It's within their plot plan. It's within their lot, but it's an easement area. So we encourage people not to have fences or playgrounds, trees, different plantings. This allows our Public Works Department and contractors the ability to access the area and work on it. So the standard approach to this kind of a project would be to construct a parallel pipe next to the existing pipe, because the problem is you need to maintain that flow through the existing pipe at all times. Doing that requires an additional easement area of 10 to 15 feet. So this would really encroach into people's backyards. It would take down fences, areas you're used to having, and you're continuing to be able to flush your toilets, but this is quite a cost for people. So the town, along with our consultant Dylan Phillips, came up with an idea to utilize new valve technology. This is similar to the valve and bypass system that we used on the water reclamation facility repair a few months ago. Instead of building a parallel line permanently next to the existing line, what you do is you bypass the small pipe above ground. If you look at the bottom left-hand picture, you see that black pipe that kind of runs the length that the little excavator there is pulling, or skid steer, I'm sorry. So you bypass the line above ground in a black polyethylene pipe, and what you do is you use these things called insertion valves, and that's the top left side of the screen. These are very expensive valves, but the beauty of them is you can install them on a hot line. So if this line is conveying sewage, you can bring the gentleman in from the insertion valve company. They can install the valve on the line and maintain flow the entire time. They do cost about 4 to 5 times what a typical valve would cost. Typical valve, you'd have to cut the pipe, stop flow at the pump station, probably do a pump and haul. You're talking about thousands of dollars an hour. So by utilizing the bypass and insertion pipe technique, what we're able to do is temporarily locate this black bypass pipe along people's backyards and bypass short sections of the pipe. So we're talking about 1,000-foot stretches. I'm trying not to get too far into the weeds here, but this is a kind of a progression of how the project will take place. So each one of these, the width of the page represents the entire project length, and you see this little kind of U-shaped piping, that's the bypass location. You can see as the project progresses down the different steps, that bypass kind of hopscotches or piggybacks along the project, and we're able to reuse the insertion valves multiple times. We're able to reuse that same bypass pumping multiple times. And it also, in the future, allows us to, if there was a break in the new line, it allows us to maintain those connection points where we had the bypass, and we can actually go in there much easier, much quicker, and bypass a broken line, which will reduce costs for pump and haul and other construction costs. The other beautiful thing about this type of construction is it didn't require any additional land or very minimal. So originally we were talking about purchasing easements from over 50 properties. This is, a high-level exposure for the town. You have to make 50 deals with 50 individuals. There's a lot of time involved, a lot of money, and a lot of uncertainty. So we've reduced the amount of land that's actually needed from 50 easements to, we're actually only dealing with 2 homeowners on multiple properties. So there's the 4 shown here, which is all the Braxton Village HOA properties that we need easements from. And these 2 Duke Energy easements. Once we do exit the neighborhood area, we are going to revert back to traditional parallel pipe construction methods. It made economic sense. So currently, where are we at? So the plans have been designed. They're completely designed. And now we're asking for some money to go acquire these easements. If that's approved tonight, we plan on doing that acquisition over the fall and winter and looking to start construction in the spring. We expect the construction to last about 7 months, so finishing up next year, fall. So about a year from today, we're hoping to wrap this project up. I think that is it. The anticipated cost, which would be handled by sewer reserves, is about 2.7 million, and this is what has been planned on from early on, although early on it was before we had developed the bypass and insertion valve method, and more of that money was going towards land acquisition. Now more of that money will be going towards actual construction. So that is the presentation I have. What I'm asking for tonight is funding in the amount of $70,000 for the right-of-way acquisition. And then once right-of-way acquisition is complete, we would bid the project for an early spring start.
I just had a quick question, Aaron.
Sure.
Back on April 5th, 2016, you made a similar presentation. This is just simply a little more of the issue?
Yeah, well, just given that some of the council members were not present for that presentation, just kind of wanted to bring up some of the old history and kind of go over the reasoning for the project.
Okay. Other questions of Aaron?
Aaron, of the homeowners that you're talking to, what impact is this easement going to have? Are they losing fences or playgrounds, or how are the talks going with them?
Sure. So the actual homeowners, we don't have any homeowners we're going to be dealing with. It's either Duke Energy or it's the Homeowners Association.
Okay.
So we haven't talked to them yet. They're fairly minimal takings, a few hundred square feet here and there. But in the winter, we're looking to have a public meeting with all of the property owners along the corridor where the pipe's going to be replaced, just to talk to them about, what we're doing to, help them and benefit them and not have to acquire easements on their property, because we are going to need people to, get their fences out of the way. And there's playgrounds along that easement, jungle gyms, there's a gazebo. We've got to get people and bring them in and talk to them about why we're doing what we're doing and why this is as best as we could really do.
So there are homeowners now that don't know this is coming yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
They know they should know that it's an easement.
Yeah, that's a standard town policy is what you do with your easement. All the homeowners know, when they sign their mortgage or they purchase their house, they get a copy of their plot, and it shows an easement. However, people still put stuff on the easement for sure.
Right.
And that's I think, some of the pushback you'll get. So it'll be important to explain that they are responsible for the cost of moving their fence,
Yeah, and that's why we're trying to get out ahead early in the winter. People have fence directly over the easement. What we've done in the past is sometimes the contractor can just remove panels of the fence and still kind of get through. Sometimes that's not possible. So, we'll probably take a walk with some of the people with more substantial structures in the easement and maybe work with them a little closer.
Other questions or comments? No. Good. Motion.
Motion to funding in the amount of $17,655 for both temporary and permanent construction easements.
Second.
Motion been made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Deck.
I just don't have that, I'm sorry.
Jody,
Who's
are
going?
we able to hit enter over there? Can anybody hit enter? Or you gotta? Sorry.
I gotta go back.
Thing. There.
Okay.
Okay, so to back up a little bit, there's a developer agreement for the construction going across right next door. It was approved by the town council in June of 2017. And what that developer agreement did, among other things, committed the town to build a parking deck that you see going up over there of 180 spaces, about 100 of which are on the top deck. Also allowed for an exchange of real property. The town owned a half acre in the middle of that block, and we exchanged it for a strip that is part of the deck structure. The developer agreement also had an expedited review and a 50% reimbursement back to the developer of town fees, permit fees and such. And it also allowed the developer to put up a sign for the top deck to say that that the top deck is reserved for customers and tenants of the 242 development. And it also allowed the developer to sub-assign or put signs on certain parking spaces that allowed certain tenants access to those spaces. So if you think sort of like shops at Bass Lake, you've got the package store, the UPS store says these 2 spaces are mine, 10-minute parking only, loading and unloading for the package store. So that developer agreement sort of loosely allowed the developer to do that. And Joni, can you hit the next slide? Sorry.
That's all right.
So this proposed use agreement, first off, what it does is obligates the developer to pay the town about 50% of the maintenance fees. We have an elevator on that structure, and the town is going to maintain the elevator with our sort of our blanket elevator contracts and landscaping for the deck and through sort of our parking lot landscaping agreements. What there's a proposed agreement that's circulated in your packet, and there's some comments back that first version of that document had some language that the developer had exclusive use of the top deck. We've since changed that this afternoon to to read more in keeping with the developer agreement, to call it an allocation. So he's allocated the top deck, or the developer is allocated the top deck 100 spaces. Still allows the developer to sub-assign some of those spaces, but we've written in a 50% limitation on that right. The developer, in meeting with him today with the manager and Daniel Weeks, he stated it's likely to be far, far less than that amount that is specifically doled out to certain tenants. But in order to get the lease agreements that he needs to get, he can't be too constricted on a certain percentage. So we just took the widest percentage that everybody could live with, and that was 50%. The use agreement also has language in it that there's no use allowed by the developer or tenants or anything that is inconsistent with just regular commercial parking, patron parking. You go there, you're there. If you want to park your RV there and spend the night, like maybe Walmart allows you to do in their parking lots, that's just not a normal use that would be allowed. And the town, on the other hand, does have the right to close the deck and use it to hold a shag festival or something you want to do, you know, a street festival. Christmas parade was one example to sort of commandeer the top deck of the parking upon 10 days notice. Given that that's probably going to be one of our biggest, certainly our biggest commercial center in downtown, maybe the biggest one in town, you know, that's sort of going to temper that practice. And then, as I mentioned, it's sort of a cost share of maintenance expenses. So the agreement before you has changed since the agenda went out on Friday on some comments we received from you all about the exclusive use nature of it.
Council, the example used before about a packaging store, to me, that's in a mall that a developer produced. This is still a public parking deck that we are paying for. So I'm still trying to reconcile how we can, we're paying for it, limit how tenants can, or how residents can use it.
Sure. I mean, absolutely. I mean, and you know, pretty much everything that the town owns has limits, right? The picnic shelter at Womble Park has to be rented and used. The Ting Stadium has to be rented and used. So even though it's public, it doesn't mean anybody can use. My office, for instance, paid for by taxpayers, but I can lock it and let nobody else in it but me. So there are, even though it is, so it's public, paid for by public dollars, doesn't necessarily mean that we can't restrict the use. However, it is John or Jane Q. Public going to that commercial use. You know, it's not. It's not solely for. It's not no parking at Novartis that only behind a closed gate. You know, it's for economic development downtown. So, I mean, it's not. Don't mean to dismiss your concern. It's a valid concern that you know that this is the first time we've done it in Holly Springs. You know, it's absolutely the first time we've done it. However, it's, you know, as it was expressed today in a meeting, you know, but for this agreement and providing the public parking component for the private commercial space in downtown, the private commercial space never would have come because land's too expensive. We're too confined in downtown. You know, a developer is not going to build a massive structure like this without the public participation.
One of our email exchanges, you had mentioned having a more in-depth meeting where we can get more details on this structure. Is that still a possibility? Because I think trying to get my head around this agreement, a lot of things just changed last minute. Are there other questions? I have other questions. I don't know if anybody else, council has, just to see what is it that we're paying for? How did this come about? Are there other terms and conditions that might have seemed trivial before, but we want it explained now? I'm feeling there's a lot going on last minute in terms of us making a decision, because this just changed today, and I would love a little bit more time to ask questions or we'll have a working meeting. Am I the only one?
I think, you know, I had concerns as well, you know, early on that John spoke of the exclusive use term, and you know, I can own that, right? That was a concern that I had, and after I went through the red line version today, I think the concerns I had have been addressed pretty well with the allocation, so it removes the exclusivity portion of it, which I thought was a concern. When you talk about funding a $9 million structure out of taxpayer dollars, and then we're going to sign every single spot and exclude, quote unquote, exclude the use to patrons, it was concerning. But I also understand the commercial aspect of this, that, you know, having lived in a big city before and going to get a cheesesteak, I wouldn't go stop there if I couldn't park my car and get out and go somewhere. Mm-hmm. These tenants are going to be the same way. People aren't going to go to some of the tenants if they can't find a quick parking spot, hop out and walk in there. So I understand the commercial aspect of it. And I think the result that we saw in the red, or at least that I read through in the red line version, addressed the concerns I had moving back to allocation. Now, moving forward, I think there's some concerns out there. You know, one of the main developer agreements spoke to parking for town vehicles and town employees. That was a concern the developer had. I don't know where we stand on a solution to that, where our town parking is going to be moving forward. And then secondarily, the town still owns and operates this parking structure. So we, the town, is the enforcement agent that would have to enforce this agreement and all of our other parking regulations the town may have. So we would have the ability to tow, and it's my understanding the commercial structure, the developer would not have the ability to tow people out of there without the town being involved. If that's wrong, correct me.
So that would be my interpretation of allocation. Doesn't give you the right to do that. Where that would leave us is basically, like you said, how we police all of our parking situations downtown, which is sort of the carrot approach as opposed to the stick. We haven't had to really be too heavy-handed with our parking shortage lately, or at all to date. If it comes to that, you know, there's a menu of options that you can do, hour limits, signed hour limits, and then progressively go forward from there.
I think that's my point, is undoubtedly in the future, we're going to have parking issues there. The deck's going to be full, somebody's going to park, they can't park, and then we're going to have those conversations down the line. So just preparing for what are we going to do in response to that, right? I think it's fair to the town to have an understanding of what we're going to do to respond to that. It's also fair to the developer how we're going to rectify some of those issues in the future, and not just enter into this agreement that says we're allocating these spots, but when undoubtedly something goes wrong, how are we going to fix it, and what are we going to do to enforce it? So I'm comfortable with what's on the document, but I think we need to think through what that enforcement action might look like, or how, just to make sure we're on the same page, and maybe we are after the meeting. I just want to be cognizant of that.
So John, out of the 100 spots, 50% would be designated for those businesses, correct?
The developer would not be able to sub-designate or say parking for the coffee shop only for more than 50 of those 100 spaces. It's his position that will happen in about 10 spaces. But he just wanted the flexibility to be able to, you know, lawyers do due diligence.
I've never seen something like that where, you know, parking deck, all the businesses have their own personal, their patrons or workers.
Pretty much any deck
Yeah, I've
in
seen
Raleigh has that way. You know, there's, if you look, you got to keep going up in any of the McLaurin decks that are city-owned, run by McLaurin. You got to keep going up. It says, you know, reserved for blank, blank, blank.
The companies.
You got to keep going up, yeah. Whenever I go to the courthouse, I got to walk that much further.
And you said that this signage could be limited, like during, operational hours or something. So if the
It would
shop
just
closes
be-
at 5,
Right.
it's open.
If John Q. Public wanted to go park there and look at the stars, you know, after business hours, it's perfectly okay to do that, I guess.
And
Other
then-
questions or comments?
Well, and as Councilman Berry mentioned, the town, the staff parking, you know, if you have your personal car and you have a town vehicle, I see that becoming, not immediately, but at some point, an issue, and we'll have to find space for that.
So as part of this development plan, you know, it was mentioned $7 million. The deck, I think, was about 5. There was the rest, the road, Rogers Street, and the BMP, and the surface parking across the street, across Haven Ferry, is included in that. And that surface area was added sort of after this, as it just sort of filled that need of the town employee parking and spillover commercial parking as well.
So they wouldn't be on the tabletop in that area, would be open, mostly on the surface over there.
Correct. I think, Daniel, what's the number of total parking spaces added by this project?
And I think the number was like 350, 360, something like that. Yeah. It's actually
spots on Main Street, widen the road instead of doing that expensive gas line relocation, we're going to gain roughly over 400 total spots, including the block, to all the on-street parking.
Yeah, I don't really see it a problem until we, if we develop Mims Park, and that becomes a big, that's when I see that people would be, but then we look at parking over there, I guess. But I agree, it's public deck, but if we can limit the spaces for the tenants.
I think this did that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
before it was signage on all
Yeah.
100, now we put that 50% in there, so at least they've come to the table and.
But I agree, but limit to their business hours, make sure signage,
Yeah.
express, says that.
Council, is there a time constraint why we have to make a decision on this tonight?
Mr. Keener has indicated that this is an item that needs to be wrapped up as I think they're about 50% leased. So they need to be able to wrap up the rest of their leases, and I don't want to make his argument for him if he's here to make it, but we asked him that expressly this morning if we could put this off and give you all some more time to digest it, and he's a shrewd negotiator, and he said he would really rather be able to go forward if at all possible, so.
So are you looking for a motion tonight, John, is that what you're saying? What do you think, Council?
Randy, you were going to say
Well,
something?
I'm just going to, no, I'm happy to. Thank you. I think one of the things that gave me some comfort in this was the fact that of the 180 spaces, 130 are unallocated. So really only 50 are allocated. So the vast majority there are unallocated for that general use. The other thing I think that's important is that within the agreement, we have the ability to use all the spaces for special events with given the notice, which I think is important as well for, again, that public purpose and that public space. And thirdly, I think just the nature of this economic development opportunity and project that you have is, business owners would expect some level of assurance that patrons will have some parking, and there'll be some churn and some turnover with that parking near their businesses. And I think on this one, it feels like that we struck, I think, a balance that hopefully can work, and I feel comfortable at this point.
Other questions or comments?
I'm with Dan. I think the main concerns I had were addressed. My concern is this is a lot all of a sudden, and it feels like I haven't, absorbed. Are there other questions or other scenarios we haven't thought of that if we would bring up now would be a good thing before than later? Because it feels like we're trusting an allocation, but then to Councilman Lee's point, are there some scenarios that we should, we think about a little bit, we could think through? So that's my hesitation.
The potential building of the block, how would that impact parking as well? In terms of an agreement, would they ask for additional reserve parking for them, or?
So not on this deck. The bottom floor was supposed to be part of their spillover and town hall parking and spillover for 242, frankly. And then across the street, the block does have a good-sized lot of their own parking. I'm not sure it's 64 spaces or.
You remember, Aaron?
60 spaces.
60?
For that structure, which probably not enough, definitely not enough. It's, there's already a 50% limitation from their use if they're close to public parking. I think the land planners that got involved in this wanted to have less parking than more parking. You don't want to have a sea of parking in your downtown. So I think that was part of it. So at full build out and everybody coming downtown under a vibrant situation, you're gonna have to drive around to find a spot. And I think that was probably by a little bit by design. I mean, you can't have a complete sea of parking. But, you know, so you're not going to see another one of these from the block, from Malbec. That was not in their developer agreement, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
There's a long-winded way of saying no.
Okay.
But they do, you know, this deck was designed to accommodate both the block and 242.
Okay. What else?
Well, I guess we can just hope that the tenants of 242 in the block are, out by 5, and the restaurant goers and everything come in after that. I think we're going to be all right, but I think we will run into some times where parking may be an issue, and that's just going to hopefully drive us to improve our walkability a little bit more.
But isn't this the time to kind of think through some of those instead of hope later? I mean.
Well, I think I don't know what else we could change for that right now, because I agree with, as far as the tenants lease, that we may end up with an empty building if we really.
Right, and I don't want that.
Yeah.
I think the message so far has been this is a public parking deck, and what does that mean in terms of public? And messaging that or understand. I don't even know if I could really explain it as a public parking deck, but some of it is not really
Kind of like
allocated.
Wamble Park, it's public, but sometimes it's not. It's under exclusive use by Wake FC or some other signee. That's kind of how I looked at this a little bit, that, I mean, it is a public lot deck. We get to use it some of the time in general. And ideally, it's also bringing in people downtown to spend money and businesses to spend money and pay those taxes. But like the public park that we build, some residents could use it some of the time, some all the time, some, infrequently. But they all have an opportunity to use it, I guess.
Was there any further information on the cost share of maintenance expenses we didn't talk about? Any specifics?
This is basically 50%.
50?
Yeah.
Okay.
49.52.
Anything else? As I said earlier, are you looking for a motion on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Quick to a motion? Oh, really? There you go. Who wants it?
Motion to enter into a use and shared maintenance agreement with 242 Main Street, Holly Springs LLC for the parking deck at Town Hall Commons.
Second?
Motion been made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thanks, sir.
All right, now let's go to other business. Anything new on crosswalk safety, Kendra? We okay on that now?
The RFBs are being installed, and you can see those going in at all the select locations. And that's all I have for update on the downtown crosswalks. I don't know if there's other crosswalks.
I saw them
They're
testing
looking good.
over by Middle Crest
Right.
this morning.
Did too.
The fellow was out
I
there
noticed that, yeah.
with a clipboard and actually lighting it up for a couple of kids to cross the
Yeah.
street to school. Getting there.
So, Mr. Mayor, I was going to ask Chief Herring and Kendra to talk a little bit about the crosswalk over at Avon Ferry and Castle.
Sure.
In front of the schools. Is this a good time?
Absolutely.
Add on to that? So I just wanted to get an update on what was happening, just a brief explanation of what we saw in the news, what happened there, and what we're doing going forward. No, you go ahead.
Come to the podium,
Chief.
please.
Thank you.
Hi, Chief. How are you? Hanging in.
Good evening. So last week, as we discussed via a lot of emails on Thursday and Friday, the prior week leading up to the start of school, Wake County was continuing to finish up the construction for the Buckhorn Elementary School that's on Honeycutt. The elementary school that's on Honeycutt had to, by their transportation impact assessment, had to do some turn lane improvements at the intersection of Cass Holt and Avent Ferry Road. They were right up against the clock, the Wake County contractor, to get those changes made before school started on Monday. And so they worked on that. DOT owns, operates, reviews plans, issues approval, and inspections of all signals. And that's the signal, and that's the striping associated with the signal. So the town was not involved in that process early on. They submit those, Wake County submits the plans to DOT, DOT reviews and approves. However, Monday morning, clearly there was an issue that we were made aware of here at Town Hall. So we quickly started trying to get the two parties together to facilitate a solution to that problem. The contractor, in those discussions, the town, myself talking with several folks at DOT and several people at Wake County, there's Wake County Transportation Office, but then there's Wake County Facilities Office. Two different silos, if you will, under the Wake County branch, and talking to a few of those folks to get it up the flagpole, so to speak, so that we could get some attention. The contractor showed up at, which once it was known that there was an issue, there wasn't a delay installed in the signal box that Friday afternoon before everybody left to go home before school on Monday. Once that was known, Wake County was very responsive. They called their contractor out there to fix it. The contractor showed up on Thursday afternoon, fixed the delay at the PED cycle, and then on Friday morning, they were striping the crosswalk. And so, you know, we really hope to facilitate that solution, but we also, on Thursday, I emailed all three principals, because what we witnessed on Wednesday was, in addition to not having that lead time for the pedestrian installed, what we witnessed is a lot of driver inattention. That is an opinion, not my professional opinion. Let me just, I mean, he can tell you about professional. We were out there looking at the signal, trying to get a handle on what was going on so that we could try to get these parties together. And what we were seeing is just some driving that I thought there should be some education. So we emailed all three principals and asked them to just try to get out information any way that they have possible to the student drivers, the new student drivers, that you have to yield to pedestrians in the crosswalk, and you actually have to look that direction, not just looking left. Also for the pedestrians that are walking, knowing that these folks turning right may not be thinking about you. So being aware of your surroundings. And then the bus drivers, you know, just reminding everybody of that situation. So all three principals were very responsive. I immediately heard back. I don't have children at that school, so I'm not sure kind of what information went out, but they assured me that they were getting information out. We also then spoke with our chief of police and wanted to get extra coverage out there and awareness, which he can speak to. So I think that at the end of the day, it would have been preferable that that not happen at all, because pedestrians were in danger for that window of time, but they did correct it as soon as they could, you know, once they were notified of that. And I think we're talking about, when we spoke to DOT, so again, they operate that signal, and we can ask for changes to be made. One thing that Chief Heron and I were talking about was adding a little bit more lead time than what they added. You know, maybe just to give those pedestrians a few more seconds to establish themselves in the crosswalk. We can ask for that. Hopefully they'll implement that, and then we'll continue to monitor the activity there. The next step, and it's a pretty big next step, as I've mentioned, is they could turn that light red when pedestrians activate the crosswalk. So every time someone hits that crosswalk button, those right turns would get that red light. They would get a pop-up board They call it a blank out board that says no right turn while pedestrians. It hangs up there by the signal head all the time. It's just black, except when you initiate the ped crossing, it illuminates. Now that, from what DOT is telling us, that will take capacity away from that signal, because what you're doing is you're giving that pedestrian all the protection that you can possibly give them, but it's also taking about 30 to 45 seconds of green time away. So you'll start to back up traffic. There'll start to be a capacity issue. So they said they really like to hold that for special situations. So we were going to ask for a little bit more lead time, monitor that, and then maybe see where we are with that next request. Just kind of make some incremental changes and see how that affects things. And I can let Chief.
So, and I want to thank Kendra and Chief and everybody for their working so quickly on this. Unfortunately, the media was notified while you were actively working on this, and was brought into it. But thank you. I know everybody kind of dropped everything and jumped on it, and it was important to do so. So thank you very much for doing that.
Absolutely, thank you.
So,
Well, that was very thorough, which makes it very easy for me.
Do we have something to add, sir?
yeah.
The only thing that I would add is just to sort of reiterate that once we became involved, we did put an officer out there to mainly just as a presence and a reminder. And in addition to that, the officer was making some observations and was able to report back what they saw. And what we did see is the issue where there was no delay. So basically the motorist and the pedestrian were getting the green light, if you will, at the same time. So there was a little bit of a conflict there, but we have seen some noticeable improvement in that since the delay has been added back in. I would add, we did have discussions about a little more delay so the pedestrian would and could be more established in the crosswalk. I think that would definitely help. I think that's something that we should try. But we have to continue to remind motorists that they still have to see their way clear even when the light's green, even when it's green. It doesn't give you carte blanche to just make any movement that you want to. You have to see your way clear. As far as enforcement, we have, that's always an option. But I think we have to strike a balance when it comes to enforcement, because part of the issue there and some of the complaints that we're hearing is the delays. So it makes drivers impatient. It's another thing that causes inattention. And to be honest, sometimes when we do enforcement campaigns, it just adds to that. So we don't want to go out there with 5 or 6 police cars. There'd be more blue lights and stopping multiple cars and exacerbating the issues. So we're right now just trying to make observations and get that feedback from the officers and share that with engineering so that we can develop a plan. Because it's our goal, everyone's goal, should be to make sure that our kids arrive to school safely. And that starts with driver behavior. We can do all the infrastructure improvements, we can hang lights, we can make adjustments, we can add in delays, but one thing that we can't control is driver behavior. And that contributes. That's a big contributor to the delays and the safety issues. So that's sort of where we are now. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
I think, and it's especially if we look at our demographic, it's parents in the morning who are in a hurry to get to work after dropping their kids off at the high school, and then also the high school students, new drivers, things, so it is, they just want to get out of there. One suggestion I have is maybe making a video on crosswalk safety. I mean, people still don't understand. If you're standing on the sidewalk at a crosswalk, the cars are supposed to yield to you. They don't have to wait till you're in the street. Things like that. How, maybe teaching kids how to, cross safely in zones like that where they, the cars could turn. That might be something that our communications department can do.
That's an excellent suggestion and a great point. And we did add that, I believe, when we put something on our our website last week, and we added the link to the crosswalk video that we had done previously.
Well, I would even like to go a little further. Remember that development video, the animated one? Maybe for the younger kids, to turn that into animation, for the younger kids to really get their attention. Because as you said, they need to be aware just as much as the driver, the kids crossing the street. And I think, maybe breaking it down to their level might be.
Right. And our resource officers are having some serious conversations with those student drivers.
Yeah, they were out there today. I saw them this afternoon.
So, and I think that'll help as well.
And Mayor and Council, if I could, I want to echo the appreciation that Councilwoman Lee expressed. That Kendra used the word, I think, facilitate, and she really facilitated a lot last week in terms of pulling different groups together. And then, of course, the chief and his officers in terms of helping with the presence out there. So thank you. I think they had a real good, fast response, and appreciate that very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Good job.
Thanks.
You had mentioned you're out on Friday, and thank you for the quick response. You're out today. How many more days do you think that you'll be out there, just to get an assessment? And then what recommendations that you would bring back to, I guess, for Kendra, who we can bring it up the chain to see if we need to increase it, whether it's 6 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds?
As long as resources allow us, and sometimes it's dictated by the call volume, but as long as we have the resource to put on the issue, then we'll be there. I guess right now, sort of indefinitely, or until we feel comfortable that the issue is, or the issue that we have a safe intersection and it's safe for the pedestrians.
Right, I just don't want to waste the resources. If you know that if increasing the time, right, would definitely help, then, we could.
I think it will, but I think there'll be a period of time that we have to assess that and make those observations, get that feedback. So we'll be there until such time as we can determine that.
Great, thank you.
Anything else?
Not on this.
None of this.
No.
Still under other.
Are we? Are we moving on from?
Still under other business? We still
Yeah.
have? Yeah.
Yeah, I got just one thing, and Kendra, you spoke to this earlier about TIAs, and I wanted to revisit some of those changes, that we put in place like a year ago, back when I was on the planning board, and I attended the planning board meeting last week, and, the Cass Holt case we heard tonight, their traffic engineer was not at the planning board meeting, and I think there's been a theme of not enough information as it relates to some of this traffic detail at that level, and I think it would be a service to them to get some of that ahead of time. So when we're doing staff reviews of these plans, if we could nudge the developers to have their traffic engineers at the planning board meetings, I think it would be beneficial to that body to hear some of that information and allow them to properly evaluate it. And the other thing, I guess it was a year ago when we now require them at rezoning, right? So my expectation would be each rezoning case that comes through, there is a TIA and it's completed at planning board. And I think there is some confusion. This one it's dated April. I have a physical copy of it, so I saw a comment that it wasn't, but it was done before the planning board meeting. But just making sure if they could have somebody from their team there to talk about it, it would be much, much appreciated from them and, from us as well, making sure they get a proper review. The second thing on that, and Councilwoman Kelly spoke to this earlier, is just the need that we have for some of these, and some of the planning board comments I've seen recently, I think they are sharing a concern as well that there's a lot of a project-by-project based view on some of these rezoning cases that come in, and there's a case that's in the pipeline now that was at planning board last week that did not have or meet our threshold for a TIA. And I'm not exactly sure what our thresholds are, but maybe we're at a point where we can reevaluate that threshold, determine if it could be lowered and or increased in areas where we know we're expecting a hot pocket of traffic or an increase of development. Because even if that project doesn't trip the threshold, what's important is that background volume that we're building into these analyses and how we can consider that from a regional viewpoint on what the network is going to be stressed by moving forward. If there's no recommendations, so be it. There's no recommendations, but I don't know how much of a cost measure that is on the developer to require these on everything, but maybe we could look at our threshold and there's a happy medium there just to start looking at these in a regional viewpoint rather than project by project. And that wasn't directed all at you, but just in general.
I think that's great feedback. We enjoy the feedback. And when we had the workshop, we had looked at other municipalities and their threshold for requiring a TIA. And at the time of that workshop, which I say a year, it might have been a year and a half, or a little, anyway, it all runs together, but we can find that date. We were about in the middle then, with it's 150 trips in the peak hour and 1,500 total for the day. If you meet either one of those, you have to do a TIA. But I would love to go back and look at that now and see what, a year's past, has anybody changed those requirements, and see if there's any more innovative ideas to look at TIA requirements for that. And we definitely, planning board presentation and having an engineer, this actually, if you would have asked Rachel and I, we would have thought that engineer was going to be there that night, and it didn't happen like that. And so, yes, going forward, we'll make sure that doesn't happen again.
Thanks.
Anything else?
I had a couple of things.
Yes.
Councilman Berry, thank you for bringing that out. That's great. In light of what we just learned with parking downtown and there's extra spots, is there a way we could have a summarized map of what is current public parking downtown and what's coming? Because we just added new spots, or I think that'd be great, because I think this would be something that our residents would want to know what's coming up. That'd be wonderful. Randy, thank you for joining our great staff. We're thrilled to have you here. And you've got a lot coming your way. It's probably like a fire hose, but just one thing to put in mind is what are some of the working sessions? We've been waiting for you to come on board to do some visiting work. And I don't know if that's something that we need to start planning out, but that's high on the list of many of us.
It's one of my items in the manager's report. Is
Okay.
a question about a future
Well,
workshop.
then I'll just skip to my last one is I was at the Buckhorn School ribbon cutting, and glad to have welcoming all these Buccaneers to our town. It's great to have a new school. The school is beautiful. If you have not had a chance to see it, I highly recommend it. But that was a pleasure meeting those students and teachers and staff.
Anything else for the council?
No, just this past weekend, the Skyhawks were at Suggs Farm, and that was pretty impressive. They have small, I think you were there, right? Yeah. So,
Drones?
there were some drones there, small aircraft, but they did a really, really good job. I think WRAL was out there showing what these guys can do. It was pretty amazing, pretty cool, seeing all the little kids, seeing the small little aircrafts flying around. So they did it last year, they did it this year, and they're going to be coming back next year. So it was a good day.
Good, thank you. Before we transition, I just wanted to, Gerald Holloman, you stayed here all evening. I'm going to promise you I'm going to call John Byrne tomorrow morning, first thing, just for starters, okay? I'll call him. We'll work on it.
Speaking, I'm willing to go up to DC if anybody else, if they feel that.
I'll drive.
We'll head up there for a day or two, and
Sure.
hey, we did through the General Assembly, knocking on doors and going into open offices. We can do it there, so it might be something to consider.
Okay. And other than that, again, I'm proud to welcome again our new town manager, Mr. Randy Harrington. And you're on, sir.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mayor and members of council. I have three quick items, but let me begin by saying, again, a big thank you to you and staff and the community. My family and I, 2 weeks ago, were in this room, and we had just an amazing welcome. And we're very appreciative of that, and really look forward to being here and being part of the community. And I'm really excited about what we have ahead of us, so thank you very much for that. The two other items, one I want to mention, I think you all have seen this, but the Capital Area Preservation has recently awarded us an award recognizing and honoring outstanding dedication and commitment to excellence in historic preservation in Wake County. And I really want to recognize Gina Clapp and Sean Ryan, who've been working on this. I know you recently approved that, but historic preservation is so important, and it's nice to be recognized by others in our community for the work that you have done to help preserve history in our community. So thank you for that, and thank you to the staff for the great work. So, the last item, as Councilwoman Kelly alluded to, was around a future workshop. And if it's the pleasure of the council, want to just attest, if you'd like us to, we can poll you, maybe throw out a couple optional dates to have a workshop. My understanding is that one particular workshop of interest is around Parks and Recreation and some of the potential investments in that particular area. I also understand there's maybe one around Development 101, or I think that idea has come up in the past, but I think that the key one, at least out of the gate, feels like it's the Parks and Rec conversation. And so wanted to see if you'd like us to move forward in polling you on that, and we'll come back with a couple dates and make that happen for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So I think
Sounds
probably,
good.
that, and Joni will probably help me on that in terms of testing some dates with you.
Okay.
Great. That's all I have tonight for the manager's report.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Counselor?
So I don't have any pressing need, but there was a request for litigation update. We have two real litigation matters. One of the Curran builders that you're, I think, familiar with. It's a class action lawsuit relating to alleged impact fees. That, the status of that litigation is that we are negotiating out a very long and not really complex, but detailed settlement agreement with the plaintiff's attorneys. We've queued that up to be ready for you to discuss at your next meeting on September 18th. So if you wanted to wait and we can cover both litigation matters at that time, that might be more efficient, or we could do it now and do it then. It's up.
What's your pleasure, Councilman?
That's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
I could wait.
We can wait.
Unless
Enjoy your company, but not that much.
you-
That's right.
Just kidding. It's been a long day.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Let's have a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Yay.
We are adjourned. Thank you all for staying and
Thank you all.
coming.